Hello everyone and welcome to my true crime channel. Today I'm going to be talking about a cold case, and it's the murder of Ian Grant. And the reason I want to discuss the case today is because I personally knew Ian Grant. He died in my home city of Cambridge, and not only that, he lived metres away from my family home and he died metres away from my family home. So today I'm looking into the tragic murder of Ian Grant. Now, Ian Grant was a 24-year-old man that lived in Cherry Hinton in Cambridge. I grew up in Cherry Hinton in Cambridge, so as I said before, this is a cold case that's very close to my heart. I'm gutted that after all these years there is still no closure for Ian's family. It's 25 years ago that he was murdered, and yet no one has been arrested for the savage murder of Ian Grant. Ian Grant was quite a well-known figure here in Cambridge. He was a 24-year-old man when he was killed. He was quite a larger-than-life character, very bubbly, great sense of humour. I think he was also known as a gentle giant. He was a very tall man, quite well-built, quite muscly, quite hench, as we say here in the UK. And he'd worked as a nightclub bouncer and also as a security guard in his life. And at the time that he died, he was currently unemployed and he was looking to set up his own security firm. Now, it's often been thought that that may have had something to do with his murder, and that the other people that run the security and firms that provided security and bouncers to the nightclubs of Cambridge didn't like the fact that Ian was going to set up his own company, supplying security, and perhaps that had something to do with his murder. Personally, I'm not sure. I will go through more theories on Ian's murder throughout the video, but I just wanted to give you a bit of background that he had been working in security in the lead up to his death. So the way Ian Grant was murdered was extremely brutal. It was a gangland style shooting. He was shot at point blank range in the head and also in the hand. He had no chance of surviving and he was left for dead. He was shot metres away from where he lived in Speedwell Close in Cherry Hinton in Cambridge. And the connections that I have with this man in this case are very bizarre. Not only did Ian Grant live down Speedwell Close in Cherry Hinton, I myself, with my family, my mum and my older brother David, also lived down Speedwell Close. So that's connection number one. Now, connection number two is, as a 12-year-old girl, I was quite the entrepreneur, and I used to go car washing with one of my girlfriends, and we used to charge people sort of £3, £4, £5 to wash their car. And we'd go around the local houses where we lived, knocking on doors, seeing if people would let us wash their cars. And we met Ian Grant because of that. We knocked on we rung the buzzer of his flat in Speedwell Close, having never met him before, me and one of my school friends. And we washed his car. Not only did he pay us both £5, whereas we charged £5 for us both to do it, so he gave us double the money. He gave us a penguin chocolate bar. I'm sure my UK viewers will know what that is. Very nice chocolate snack. And he gave us a drink each. Now, most people that we clean cars for certainly didn't pay us double. They didn't give us chocolate bars and drinks, and he was a really sweet guy, a really sweet man, and he made me and my friend feel really welcome. And to be honest, out of everyone we cleaned cars for, and we must have cleaned hundreds of our neighbours' cars over the years, he was the most nicest person we ever cleaned a car for, and he always stuck out in my memory. Now, when he was shot dead and I saw his picture in the newspaper, I remember saying to my friend at the time, "Oh my God, that's that really nice man Ian that we met. He's been killed? What the hell?" One of the last places that Ian Grant had been working within Cambridgeshire was in a place called St Ives, which is a town on the outskirts of Cambridge, and he'd worked at a nightclub called the LEL. Now, another strange connection that I have with Ian Grant and the LEL club is not only did I go there clubbing in my youth, which was quite a few years ago now, guys, my older brother David also used to go to the LEL, and not just to go clubbing and dancing, he used to DJ there, often garage music. My UK fans should know what that is if they're a similar age to me. Good old UK garage back in the 90s. So my brother was a DJ at this club where Ian worked. Now, I don't think my brother knew Ian, but it's another weird connection with Ian Grant, the fact that somewhere he worked, my own brother worked, and I also visited the nightclub myself in my teens. So on the night of Tuesday, the 14th of November, 1995, Ian Grant was shot at point blank range, as I said, in the head and in the hand. He was shot on wasteland, metres away from where he lived in Speedwell Close, And basically all you had to do from where he lived in his block of flats was walk a couple of 100 meters to the top of Speedwell Close. You came to a roundabout, and there was a big expanse of land, grass at the back, and it was over there, I'd say a few 100 meters from where he lived, that he was left for dead, and unfortunately found the next day, I believe, by a member of public. Not enough DNA was left on the scene to have anybody arrested. The murder weapon wasn't left at the scene. Not much was left at the scene other than, tragically, Ian's dead body. Now, something to note is that 2 weeks before he was murdered, his girlfriend's car was set alight, set on fire by an arsonist down the road where they lived, Speedwell Close. Now, if that wasn't a warning that one of them or both of them had upset someone, maybe someone in the gangland sort of underworld of Cambridge, I don't know what is a sign. The fact that the car was set alight 2 weeks before Ian was murdered tells me someone had his number, someone was out to get him. The police that found his body said it was an execution-style killing. He'd been shot at point-blank range in the back of the head and in the hand. Now that leads me to believe he had no idea he was going to be murdered. So one of the big points to note about this case is the last time Ian Grant is seen alive is at 8 p.m. on the night of his murder. He was seen by his girlfriend, who was 21 years old at the time. Her name was Samantha Kerslake. They were at home in their flat in Speedwell Close in Cherry Hinton, and at that time they'd seen a shadowy looking figure, a man, hanging around outside, acting a bit suspiciously. Ian went out to speak with the man. I believe they've obviously gone off for a walk, and he's never seen again. Now, I believe that man did that on purpose to try and get Ian to come out. He leads him away, maybe saying they're going to have a chat or something like that. I believe other people were waiting in the wasteland meters away from Ian's flat, waiting in prey almost to kill him, and I don't think Ian had any idea what he was walking into. I really don't. Now, obviously, Samantha, his girlfriend, Ian's girlfriend, was absolutely distraught at his murder. They'd been together quite a while. They were really in love. They were very young. She was absolutely devastated by his murder, and she couldn't understand who would do this to her boyfriend, to Ian. Now, if they were a close couple, you would have thought if he had any enemies, which apparently he did, I don't know who they were, but it is known that he had a lot of enemies, you'd think his girlfriend would know about them. I'd like to think they would have discussed those sort of things if either of them had a threat in their life or against their life, or they thought someone was out to get them, or just in general that they had a lot of enemies. You'd think they'd discuss it amongst themselves. So it makes me wonder if Ian was involved in certain things. I'm not saying I know what they were, but certain maybe criminal things that his girlfriend wasn't aware of, and that's why she wasn't aware people were out to get him. I don't know if that's true. It's just my own theory, and I could be wrong, guys, but I wonder if Ian had been involved in something criminal, and that is why his girlfriend didn't know about the enemies. Or perhaps he knew there was a threat to his life, and then this is more plausible really, he didn't want to worry his girlfriend because he seems such a nice guy. That is more of a genuine theory in my mind. He may have had a threat to his life. He may have known that he was in trouble, people were out to get him, but he didn't want to worry his girlfriend Samantha. Now, if true, that's very honourable of Ian, and from the man that I met the day that I washed his car with my friend, I believe that that could be very true. Just to give you a bit of perspective from his girlfriend as to what sort of person that he was. In the Cambridge Evening News, Samantha Kerslake was quoted as saying, "We loved each other in a way I simply cannot describe. At first we were carefree and having fun, but I later realised there was more to the relationship. We grew together and shared a lot of love and happiness. Ian was always generous, quick-witted, trusting and kind. He would always help people as much as he could. His smile would light up his whole face. He gave so much to so many people." Now, that tells me all I need to know. Even if I hadn't met Ian Grant, that would tell me what a lovely, genuine man he was, that he was kind to people. And when I met him, like I said, I got the impression that he was a gentle giant. Me and my friends were only 12 years old when we washed his car. He was really kind when I met him. I didn't meet him for long, admittedly, but the fact, even if I hadn't met him, he lived so near to my mum's house, and he lived down a road that I used to live down, and not only that, worked as a security guard at a nightclub that my brother had DJ'd at and that I'd been to to go clubbing. So there are so many connections that I have with this man. It's just a bizarre thing in my mind that I have so many connections with him, and that 25 years after he was brutally murdered, shot dead in, you know, in public, in open air. I know it was at night, but it was such a big crime in Cambridge. It really shocked Cambridgeshire, not just the city centre, all of the surrounding villages. Everybody was shocked about it. In the 90s, people didn't go around shooting people. After Dunblane, handguns were banned here in the UK, and this wasn't really something that regularly happened. We didn't have regular shootings, and we certainly didn't have shootings in Cherry Hinton, little Cherry Hinton. Now, just to give you a bit of background about Cherry Hinton, it's on the outskirts of Cambridge. It's a little village. I wouldn't say everybody knows everybody, but depending where you live within the village, if it's the north or the south, you do know most of your neighbours. Lots of people gossip. I'm guessing some people in Cherry Hinton might have known who really murdered Ian. Personally, I never heard. There were rumours that flew around at the time, but there was never really any backing in that. But who killed Ian Grant? Come on. If you know anything about who killed Ian Grant, please ring Cambridgeshire Constabulary. Get in contact with Crime Stoppers. You'll be able to find all of the information for both of those organisations, the police and Crime Stoppers, on the internet. So it's Cambridgeshire Constabulary you need if you know anything about this crime. If you don't wish to ring the police, you can anonymously ring Crime Stoppers. Ian's family have waited 25 long years to know what happened to their son. He was only 24 years old. He had his whole life ahead of him. He's not much younger than my younger brother. If someone murdered my younger brother, well, I'd want to murder them. Just saying, sorry guys, but I would. That's how I feel. But after 25 years, if someone murdered my little brother, I don't know how I'd live with the not knowing. So if any of you guys have heard anything about this case, if anyone out there knows something but never wanted to speak out about it at the time, it's 25 years later. Let Ian Grant's family have some peace. Let his girlfriend at the time that he was murdered, Samantha Kerslake, have some peace. And let this cold case finally be solved. Now, nightclubs were very big back then. The clubbing scene was massive. House music and garage music was mainly the music that people listened to in the nightclubs. And there was definitely a gangland style underworld where drugs were concerned in the city. Now, certain people ran certain clubs, and they had certain security people working on the doors, and they were provided by certain companies, and the majority of the time it was the security of the nightclubs that brought the drugs into the nightclubs. Now, I think, perhaps I could be wrong, but Ian Grant wanting to start his new security company may have made the other security companies within Cambridge that were the main drug barons of the city, punting all the drugs out into the nightclubs. Maybe they were worried, because Ian wasn't into drugs and those sorts of things, that their operations were going to get closed down. He was going to have a more genuine legal setup, and perhaps they were worried that all their drug dealing and money that they made from drugs was going to go out the window. So really, I think the main theory for Ian Grant's death is that he was killed by someone within a gang, within a family in Cambridge, perhaps that are well known for drug dealing, well known for not necessarily killing people, but roughing people up, beating them up. Could it have been that he upset the wrong person? Did he upset the wrong family? Or one of these families, one of the other people that run a security company? And was it them that he'd put out? I don't know. I haven't got any evidence of that, but it seems the most plausible thing. Most 24-year-old men weren't wanted and shot dead in the head, you know, in an outside space, meters, just meters. And I'm not joking when I say meters. I'm going to try and include some photos of how far away his house was from the scene, but just meters from where he lived. He was shot dead. It was such a shock to me, such a shock to the residents of Cambridge, and if you did hear about it at the time, it was a shock to the people of the UK. Now, I believe that Cambridgeshire Constabulary, or Cambridgeshire Police as they're also known, looked back into this case in 2013. So around 8 years ago, the case is reopened and looked into, but sadly and tragically, it didn't result in any arrests, and the cold case of Ian Grant remains unsolved. So since the tragic murder of Ian Grant, there have been a number of arrests, but it has never resulted in anyone being charged. And in the year 2000, two men were taken to Norwich Crown Court on suspicion of Ian's murder. One was cleared, but the other man, weirdly, the jury couldn't make their mind up on. So because in the year 2000, when this went to Norwich Crown Court, one of the defendants that they were looking into couldn't be charged, or the jury, the people in the court, couldn't make up their mind. So it goes back to court the following year in 2001, and this other man was sadly acquitted. So again, years and years passed by after Ian's died, and no one has ever been brought to justice for his savage murder. Case was reopened, re-looked into in the year 2013, and the reason for that is the police said they had new DNA evidence. Now, I've never been told or found out what this DNA evidence was, and they said that the net was closing in on the killer, but as I said, this DNA evidence can't have come to much because the net certainly didn't close in. The killer is still out there, which is really worrying. Now, I'd like to read you some things that Ian Grant's family have said about him, just again to give you a bit of background about what a lovely guy Ian Grant was. Virginia and James Grant, Ian's parents, described him as a gentle giant who loved rescuing hedgehogs. He loves rescuing hedgehogs. He was a guy after my own heart. I have a little resident hedgehog in my back garden, and at the moment it's got a lovely little baby hedgehog and it's extremely cute. And when I go out there at night to put my rubbish out or something like that, just to pop outside to get some fresh air, I'm always looking out for my little hoggy friend. I called him Hoggy Roo. Sorry, I'm being a bit silly about hedgehogs, but the fact that he loved rescuing hedgehogs shows you what a gentle giant he was, and he's a man after my own heart, the fact that he loved nature. They said that they felt a glimmer of hope that his killers would be brought to justice. His mother, Virginia, paid a moving tribute, saying, "To us, Ian was the perfect son. He was always considerate of our thoughts and feelings. We didn't just lose our son that day, I also lost my best friend. Ian adored all animals, and I have fond memories of him and I rescuing hedgehogs and other injured animals, and his joy when he could do something to help them. Ian was known by his family and friends as a real gentle giant, and he really was just that. Ian was a wonderful, kind person and a true gentleman." Sorry guys, I'm getting a bit emotional. I'm welling up here, so I'm sorry if my voice is sounding like I've got a frog stuck in it. I find that so emotional to hear what Ian Grant's family said about him. As I said, I didn't meet him for long. I didn't know him for long. But as a 12-year-old girl, the gentle giant was the man that I met the day that I washed his car, the lovely man that gave us £5 each, which when you're 12 years old is a lot of money. The fact that he gave us chocolate biscuits and drinks, and no one else had really been that kind to us before. You know, the people that did let us wash their cars just shoved the money at us and wanted rid of us, and most people didn't even want us to wash their cars. So the fact that Ian Grant was such a wonderful man, such a lovely man, and the fact that I met him, so I know that was true. I know I was only 12, but I've always been a good judge of character, and I'm quite an intuitive person. So I knew when I met him that he was a lovely guy. And even though I only met him for a really short period, I felt like I knew him. Because he lived down Speedwell Close and I'd lived there as a 9-year-old girl, I felt some sort of connection to him. The fact that my mum still lives in Cherry Hinton, 25 years after Ian was murdered, my mum still lives in the same house that she lived in when Ian was murdered. She lives only metres from the place that he was murdered, which now is no longer wasteland. A Tesco supermarket has been built there. And to be honest, if you didn't know about the murder of Ian and you saw the Tesco supermarket that's there in Cherry Hinton now, you wouldn't have a clue that a poor 24-year-old man was brutally murdered, you know, execution style, shot dead in the back of his head. You just wouldn't know it. You wouldn't have a clue. So one more point I want to make, just a small one, is that in 2013, when the police looked back into this case, a man was arrested. Now, no details of his name was given out at the time, but he was eventually freed and not charged for Ian's murder. So as I said, there's got to have been at least 4, 5, 6 arrests in the last 25 years, but not one of them has led to anybody going to prison, or for Ian Grant's family and friends and his girlfriend at the time, Samantha, to get the justice for him and the closure that they need in his death. So anyway, guys, I'm really sorry that I got a bit emotional during this video. I knew that I was likely to get a bit teary and a bit upset talking about this. I know it was 25 years ago, but to me it feels like yesterday. I grew up in Cherry Hinton in Cambridge. I'm a Cambridge girl. I've lived in Cambridge most of my life. Cherry Hinton is somewhere that my mum has lived for nearly 30 years. And the fact that I'd met Ian Grant makes this case so much more close to home for me. The fact that he was such a lovely man. Not that if you're a horrible man, you deserve to be killed, but he was such a lovely man. I cannot get my head round why anybody wanted to kill him. So as I said before, guys, if you've heard anything about the murder of Ian Grant in Cambridge, call the police, please, for Ian Grant's family's sake and for his friends, and for Samantha, his girlfriend at the time's sake. Call the police. It's Cambridgeshire Constabulary or Cambridgeshire Police. You can find all of their information on the internet. If not, call Crime Stoppers. You can report crimes anonymously to Crime Stoppers. If you've got any information, no matter how small, pick up the phone, ring Crime Stoppers, and you could help Ian Grant's family, if you know anything about this case, get the closure they so desperately need and deserve. So anyway, guys, apologies again for getting upset. I did try my best not to do that, but clearly I couldn't hold it in. So I'm sorry that I got emotional about this case, but it's close to my heart. I still get upset when I think about Ian, 24 years old, your whole life ahead of you, and it's just cut out, snuffed out in one night. And for what? Because you wanted to start a new security company? Well, what, can't you start a new security company in Cambridge? Well, clearly not in the 90s. I mean, it's such a pointless death. He didn't seem like he'd done anything wrong. He had no real criminal record that was known of. He never hurt anyone, or, like his mum said, he was a gentle giant that used to, like, save and rescuing hedgehogs. He hardly sounds like someone that deserved to be shot in the back of the head, execution style, and left to die on his own in wasteland, in grass, a grassed area, very near to where he lived. Sorry I got emotional during this video, guys. You might not want to see me getting like that, but I can't help it with this case. I really hope, I really hope and pray that the unsolved case, the unsolved murder of Ian Grant is one day going to be solved. So guys, I hope you found today's video informative. If you hadn't heard of the case of Ian Grant, I hope you've enjoyed hearing, or not enjoyed, but found it interesting hearing about his case, why it's remained unsolved, what a shock it was to the Cambridge community. Something I'd love to know, guys, is if you have heard of this case, or even if you haven't, put your comments below to let me know why you think Ian might have been murdered. And I'd love to know especially, so please comment below if you've heard of this case before, because it's quite an unknown cold case. Once it went cold here in Cambridge, it wasn't really reported highly in the public media, in the tabloid newspapers. There was no social networks, no Facebook, no Instagram, no YouTube, no doing this like I'm doing now, because YouTube didn't exist. So it wasn't publicised as much as it may be now, had he been murdered in 2021. So if you have heard of the case, let me know, because I'd love to know if you've heard of the case. But if you haven't, let me know why you think Ian may have been murdered. Do you think it's plausible that because he wanted to set up a security company of his own, the security companies within Cambridge weren't happy, and that was why he was murdered? I find it hard to believe myself, but it seems like the most plausible theory. Or did he just fall out with the wrong person? To be honest, I think we'll never know, but I hope and I pray that this case will one day be solved. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. I hope you're all taking care of yourselves and staying safe. And I will be back very soon with another true crime video. Take care, guys. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.